Okay, the first question says which singular or which in plural. In English you would never know that because it's only one word, but in Swedish you have which singular or which plural. Of these things, of these statements are correct for the fraction 2/5. And the first one is 2/5 greater than a half? Well, 2/5 we know is the decimal number 0.4, whereas a half is the decimal number 0.5. So 0.4 is not greater than 0.5. So therefore that one cannot be true. Then it says 2/5. Is it the same as the decimal number 2.5? Absolutely not. We know that 2/5 is a decimal equivalent to the decimal 0.4. How do we know that? We just divide 5 into 2 and we get 0.4. We could also multiply 2/5 top and bottom by 2 instead. And that would give us 4/10, which we know is also 0.4. So whichever way you do it, there's all these different ways of converting a fraction to a decimal. So absolutely not. No, it's got nothing to do with 2.5. That would be scary if we thought that. Is it equivalent to 0.4? C. Does 2/5 equal 0.4? Yes, it does. Is 2/5 greater than a third? Well, to understand how big a third is, we can change it to the decimal, which we know is 0.333. So 2/5 is larger than 1/3 because 0.4 is larger than 0.333. So we have two correct statements so far. Both C and D are correct. Is the number less than a quarter? Is 2/5 less than a quarter? Well, 2/5 is 0.4 and a quarter is 0.25. Is 0.4 less than 0.25? No. Okay, so there should be two correct answers for that. And you only get a point correct if you've got both of them.
1 point.
What, just 1 point for each question?
Yeah.
The next question is, what's half of 1.5? If we think in pizzas, if we had 1.5 pizzas and we actually had to half this number, what would we do? Well, we'd half this one and we'd halve this one. How much do we get then? We can actually get, we see that we get 1/2 and a quarter. We get 3/4. How do we show that mathematically? 1.5 can be written as a top-heavy fraction. It can be written as 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. So it can be written as 3/2. That's the same as 1.5. And I hope you remember that multiplying fractions are the easiest thing to do. You take 3/2 and multiply it by 1/2. That's how we multiply fractions. Multiplying fractions, multiply the top two. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. So if you convert it to a top-heavy fraction, it's very easy to get the answer 3/4. But you can answer 3/4 or you can answer 0.75 if you converted it first to the decimal 1.5 and worked it out as 0.75. So here you can answer 3/4 or 0.75. But I did say because this is a fractions paper, it's nice to keep it in fractions. Okay, then they say you've got a big number line. And you've got the answer. You've got 1, 2, and 3, etc., etc. And then they put all these different numbers on, and here's 0. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And they told you that you've got a fraction that where the numerator, the top number, is slightly larger than the denominator, but only slightly. So let's take an example of 1. So if we were to take, for example, let's take an easy one, 5/4. Here the numerator is slightly bigger than the denominator. That would give us the decimal number 1.25. So where would we be on our number line? Is there any one that sort of fits in pretty well with that? Well, yeah, this one. What if we took another one? 10/9. That would be 1.1 recurring. It would also be around there. So there's only one answer that's reasonable, where the numerator is slightly larger than the denominator. And it's got to be D. Okay. So that was that one. So when you don't feel certain with a question, put any number in, and then try it and put another number in and see if your theory still works. So it looks complicated when you read it, but it isn't if you stay calm, try a few numbers and see what happens. But you do have to remember that the numerator is the top of the dividing line in the fraction, and the denominator is the bottom one. But in Swedish, you have a much easier way of remembering that, because you have that täljaren is tak, and the bottom one, nämnaren, is down in the cellar, ner. So we have tak. So your way of remembering that is much easier than our numerator denominator. Then we have a sketch of a shape which is shaded. It's split up into quarter sections like this, and the bottom two are shaded here, and then the top two are shaded here. And how do we decide how much of this figure is shaded? Well, if we look at this one, we can see that this one is half of a quarter. So half of this quarter is shaded, okay, which is the same as 1/8. Whereas if we look at this section here, we have half of a half, which is shaded. Half of the figure is shaded, which is a quarter, which is the same as 2/8. So in this one we were shading half of a quarter, whereas in this one we were actually shading half of the figure. So how much is shaded? Well, if we add 1/8 plus 2/8, and that's why I changed this one to 8s, because I can't add eighths and quarters. I have to have the same denominator in order to be able to add fractions. An 8 plus 2/8, adding fractions is really easy when you have the same denominator. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 what? 3/8. Okay. So 3/8 of that figure is shaded. Then we've got 4 different fractions, and they want you to circle the biggest fraction. And they're giving you some really weird numbers here. And the idea here is not to work out the exact answer on the tricky ones. It's to guesstimate, quick and easy, okay? So just look at the numbers. We can see directly that this number is exactly a half. This number is less than a half. This number equals a half. And this 7/15, 7.5/15 would be exactly a half. So this is also less than a half. Whereas this one, 9.5/19 would be half. But this is 10/19. So this one here is slightly larger than a half. Therefore, that one must be the bigger fraction. And you don't have to do any calculations. You don't have to divide 19 into 10 to get that answer. It's just by looking and using your powers of reasoning. Then it says, give a fraction that is larger than 3/4, but less than 1. So we've got to think of a number that is larger than 3/4, but less than 1. Well, 1 as a fraction would be something like 5/5. And we can't go up from 3/4 to 4/4 because 4/4 would be 1. So change the denominator down here. What about 4/5? That would be 0.8. 3/4 is 0.75. 4/5 would work. 5/6, 7/8, 8/9. You've got to be very close to the denominator with the numerator, but not over it and not